Hi, this is your mini lecture for Chapter 10, Decision Making by Individuals and Groups. Here are the learning outcomes for this chapter. You may pause here and read them if you choose. We're first going to talk about what are the steps in the decision-making process. Well, first we have to recognize that we have a problem or that we need to make a decision. Next, we look at what is the objective of our decision. What are we trying to achieve? Then we want to gather and evaluate data so that we can make an informed decision. We want to listen and evaluate alternatives, select the best course of action from our alternatives, and then implement our decision. And then we want to continue to gather feedback and follow up. So it's almost like more of a loop because as we gather feedback, we might recognize problems and need to go through the decision-making process again. All right, let's look at some models of decision making. There's a rational model and a bounded rationality model. So the rational model says that our outcomes are going to be completely rational. We are making decisions based on what is the best alternative. Decision makers are aware of all the alternatives, and decision makers can calculate the probability for success in each alternative. So it's very, very well thought out, and well planned. Um, versus the bounded rationality model. Some people call this like satisficing, where managers are more likely to just select the first alternative that's satisfactory. They recognize that their conception of the world is simple. They're comfortable making decisions without knowing or looking at all the alternatives. Managers make decisions by rules of thumb, sometimes called heuristics, and then satisficing is really just this idea of choosing a good enough option. So sometimes, especially when something is high stakes, we're going to use the rational model a lot more. Sometimes in like our day-to-day decision making or when we don't have a lot of time to make decisions, we tend to use this bounded rationality model. The Z problem solving model says we need to look at the facts and the details. What are the facts? Then we use sensing and intuition, and we say, what are all alternatives what alternatives do the facts suggest? So we brainstorm and come up with solutions. Can it be analyzed objectively? So then we consider the consequences of each alternative. What is the cause and effect of each action? And then we do thinking and feeling, and what impact will it have on those involved? So can we live with this decision? How do we feel about this action? Do we have any other hunches? Next, we're going to look at the individual influences that impact decision making. All right, so one of the first one is a risk aversion. So some of us are more risk averse than others, meaning that we don't like to take risk. So depending on your comfort level with risk will have an impact on the decision making process. So risk aversion is just choosing options that have fewer risks and less uncertainty. And again, our risk taking is going to be influenced by our own individual risk aversion as well as the organizational factors. And then our cognitive style, or really how we make decisions. So do we like to gather information? Do we like to evaluate alternatives? Or are we the type that really makes decisions more on our gut and our intuition? So our personalities, our attitudes, our values, obviously, our ethics all play a role in our decision making. Our own intuition, whether we use our intuition to make decisions, how creative we are, and if we're more creative, we're going to look at a variety of different alternatives as well. So how do groups make decisions? Right? Well, there's this term called synergy. You will hear it in the real world. And this is just when groups are stimulated and produce new solutions to problems. It's when they, you kind of can think about it like if you're doing a project or you're working with a team and your team just clicks. All right, so you have mutual influence and encouragement with the group. It's just a well-functioning team. You want to gain commitment when making a decision, get knowledge and expertise to help you solve problems. There's also social decision schemes that help us to make decisions. So these are just simple rules that are used to determine our final group decision. Because I'm sure you've been in a group setting. It could be your family, it could be with your friends, it could be work at in a working environment where everybody had a different idea of what the final decision should be. Well, you can use some of these social decision schemes to make those decisions. So the majority wins rule says that the group supports whatever position is taken by the majority. Makes sense, right? We use that one a lot. Truth wins predicts that a correct decision will emerge as an increasing number of members realize the appropriateness of that decision. The two-thirds majority says that a decision will be favored if two-thirds or more of the members support it. And then the first shift rule is where members support a decision that's representative by the first shift in opinion shown by a member. So there are situations where it is better to make group decisions, situations where it's not. So some of the advantages of group decision making is that you have more knowledge from more people. You have more acceptance and more commitment. So the more people involved in the decision making, the more buy-in that you have, and a greater understanding of why the decision was made. Some of the disadvantages are that you may have pressure to make a decision you don't want to make. You may have those in the group that are dominating the conversation, and making decisions in groups takes more time. I'm sure you have heard of this concept of group think. And this is just really when you're trying to make a decision in a group and everybody kind of starts to think in the same manner. And so if somebody says, I think we should do this, and people don't want to speak up, they'll say, yeah, that's a good idea. So what happens in groupthink is you don't look at all your alternatives. You have a failure to evaluate the risks because everybody's kind of thinking the same, and then you have very biased information processing. And failure to work out alternatives or contingency plans. Group polarization is the tendency for group discussion to produce shifts towards more extreme attitudes among members, or sometimes you'll just get somebody who's more vocal. And so this can also happen. So this leads groups to these social comparison approach and this persuasive arguments. They lead groups to adopt more extreme attitudes and decisions. When we're making group decisions, there's different ways we can make group decisions. One is through brainstorming. I'm sure you've all heard of that. The nominal group technique is a structured approach to group decision making that really focuses on generating alternatives and choosing one. The devil's advocate approach says that we'll have a group or an individual given the role of critiquing during the decision making process, which is going to help eliminate some of that group think. And then dialectical inquiry is a debate between two opposing sets of recommendations, so it's more of a debate format. There are also some special decision-making groups. There's a quality circle. This is a small group of people who work voluntarily to address work-related problems, specifically looking at quality. There's quality teams that are empowered to make decisions and act on them. And then self-managed teams are teams that actually form themselves and are responsible for managing themselves, and it can actually add and eliminate team members. This leads to higher productivity, lower turnover, and a flatter organizational structure. All right. The culture also plays a role in decision making. I believe we've looked at Hofstede's dimensions, and we know that different cultures and countries have different levels of uncertainty avoidance, power distance, individualist or collectivist, and masculine or feminine cultures. And so these aspects are going to play a role in how groups make decisions as well. Next, we're going to look at how organizations can improve the quality of decisions through participation. So participative decision-making occurs when individuals who will be affected by decisions help to influence the making of those decisions. They're involved in that decision-making process. So this participation buffers employees from the negative experience of organizational politics, and it increases creativity, job satisfaction, and productivity. So some of the foundations are that you have to have a supportive organizational culture and a team-oriented work design in order for there to be empowerment and participation in making the decisions. Employees need to feel that they can actively participate. They need to feel motivated to act on their own, and they have to see the relevance of their participation as well. So that is a mini lecture for Chapter 10. As always, if you ever have any questions, please contact me.